We're down here at the Holiday Inn on the Lake with TV3, honored to be sitting with 9-time Pro Bowler, one of the all-time great Vikings, 1975 MVP, motivational speaker, author, television host. You've done it all. This is Mr. Fran Tarkenton. Welcome to the Lakes area.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
First time up in this area?
No, back in 1961. You remember that, don't you?
No.
You don't. It was the first year of the Minnesota Vikings, and I was drafted by the Vikings, and we had our training camp in Bemidji, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Which is, what, about 90 miles away? Mm-hmm. And so my first trek out of Georgia was coming up through Iowa and Minneapolis, St. Paul, and through Minnesota up to Bemidji. So I've been in this area and fell in love with this area because it's so unique. And today, when we were flying over, coming into your local airport here, it's just as beautiful as any country there is in the world. The lakes and the purity of the ground, and it's just great. So it was part of my culture going back in as long as 1961 to revisit it is pretty special.
So you're down in Georgia now then?
Well, I was born in Virginia, but I grew up in Athens, Georgia, which is where the University of Georgia is. And then I came up here to play for the Vikings, the first Viking team in '61. And we happened to win our first game against the Chicago Bears in '61.
Yeah, you kind of set a record in that game. Came in for the injured quarterback and threw 4 touchdown passes.
Well, you know, I was supposed to start that game. Okay. And then we had a veteran quarterback that they had given a #1 draft choice for, George, nice guy. And they at the last minute started him, put me in at the end of the first quarter, and we were behind 6-0 or whatever we were. And we got hot, and we won 37-13, and I threw for 4 touchdown passes and ran for another, completed 17 of 21 passes for 237 yards. I still remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people remember their first game like that, especially when you beat a team like the 1961 Chicago Bears.
Nobody knew us. You know, this whole area up here in Iowa and the Dakotas were Chicago Bear fans. And so we came in playing that team. Our first exhibition game was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Against the Dallas Cowboys.
Against the Dallas Cowboys, and that's the first time I played a game, threw a touchdown pass in that game. We had a game scrimmage the week before we played at Sioux Falls up at Concordia College. Okay. And in a squad game, and so I played in that too.
Okay, '61, the Vikings came. The game was probably on KDLM. KDLM's been a Vikings affiliate since 1961, drafted by the Vikings and in the AFL by the Boston Patriots.
That's right.
So what influenced you to come to Minnesota versus playing in Foxborough?
Well, you know, my friend Steve Noodle is not going to like me to say this, but I wasn't very smart, or I was real smart. The Dallas, back then, the Vikings drafted me and the Patriots offered me $17,500 contract and a $5,000 bonus. That's more money than I ever heard of.
Right.
The Vikings offered me $12,500 and $3,500 contract. So any reasonably smart person would have taken the Boston Patriots.
Right.
I didn't.
Right.
I came to Minnesota, and I didn't have any money. And I gave up $5,000, about 40% cut of what they were going to give me in contract, but I'm glad I did. As great as Boston is and great as a record they've had, to be here on the first team and the great history of this franchise, to be able to play here for all those years that I played here and to play in 3 of the first 11 Super Bowls, to win division championships, to get to be part of this culture that I've always loved was a tremendous thrill. I have no regrets in taking that pay cut.
The teams of the 1970s, you mentioned the 3 Super Bowl teams. I mean, a lot of people remember those teams as the Purple People Eaters with Carl Eller and Jim Marshall. But the offense pretty good, too. 2 Hall of Fame guys on the offensive line, and Ron Yeri and Mick Tingeloff. Chuck Foreman catching the ball out of the backfield. What made that offense so special? Well,
you know, we had a great offense. Jerry Burns, who's the offensive coordinator then, and God bless him, he's still living, and Bud let us run the offense, and we put in the West Coast offense. It wasn't Bill Walsh. We did it here. And we threw the ball to the running backs. We threw it to the tight ends and spread the field out. And we had 2 receivers named Ahmad Rashad and Sammy White were pretty good.
Yep.
Two Hall of Fame linemen. It was just a great culture of a team. And you have to play defense. If you don't play defense then or today, you don't win.
Right.
And we had the Purple People Eaters, and they were the best of that era, or maybe any era, and they were just great guys too. I mean, Alan Page goes off in Supreme Court judge here in Minnesota. Carl Eller and Jim Marshall were just classics. Jim Marshall, in my mind, may be the most important Viking that's ever played.
Yep, and Gary Larson went to college just down the road here at Concordia on Moorhead.
Gary Larson was a part of that Purple People Eaters, and great player and great guy. Just the culture of that team, the locker room of that team. You know, you could have 40 all-pro players. If you don't have a culture of love and looking out for each other, you don't win. And this team had that culture, and it wasn't just because of Bud. Bud was great, and our coaches were great, but it came from the leadership we had in that locker room.
I wasn't around to see those teams, but what I've heard about them is the culture is very similar to what the Vikings have going on in training camp now. A very similar team with a hard-nosed coach and Mike Zimmer, a defense-first kind of team, a mobile quarterback with a cannon arm, a top running back. What do you see for the 2016 Vikings this season compared to years past?
I think we've drafted really well. I love our owners. You know, I've gotten to know them well the last few years. They're good owners because they hire good people and let them run the business. We've got a really good general manager. He drafts well, makes good decisions. You've got to build it from defense first. I don't care who your quarterback is. You got to play defense. And you watched the Super Bowl last year. Cam Newton didn't do much, and neither did my buddy Peyton. It was a defensive game. Defense wins. Defense always wins. And we built that defense. We got great young talent on defense. Our quarterback has just played really well and improving each year. I'd like to see our offensive line get bulked up a little bit, a little more help from the receivers. Running backs, we got depth, and we got Adrian. And we got a professional football coach. Zim is a terrific guy. Was a great pick by the Will family, and he's bringing the fundamentals that we need to have for this team. But you're right. You play defense first. And we almost got there last year. You know, we had that game won.
Right.
And our kicker, if he kicks that kick 200 times, he makes it 200 times. It was a chip shot. It was a 2-foot putt. It just it went awry. And but we came back in the worst of situations. And little Teddy Bridgewater got us back in position to get so we could kick the winning field goal. It just didn't work out. And unfortunately, we've had Hail Mary passes in the past.
I know.
And these type of disappointments, and people said, "Guy, are we ever going to break through?" Yes. and I hope it's in my lifetime.
Right.
But you know, it's been such a great franchise, and in my first years here, we'd have to go out on the state in the wintertime and tell people about the Vikings because we were new. And now it's so nice to see that it's such a big deal in all of Minnesota and in the Dakotas and in Iowa and parts of Wisconsin. There's such a great loyal following, and to see that from the work that we started in '61 is pretty special.
And a very special tie to our community, number 19, Adam Thielen, a Detroit Lakes native. He's the 2015 Special Teams Player of the Year for the Vikings. What do you see in Adam Thielen helping out the wide receiver squad this year?
Well, we need help with the wide receiver squad.
Yeah, we do.
And I think, you know, we have some talent there, and I think that he could play a big part in what we do next year. We need improvement there, and I think we'll get that improvement.
And you were one of the first mobile quarterbacks opening the door for guys like Steve Young and
Roger
Staubach and those guys. But something else you did first. You were the first professional athlete to host Saturday Night Live.
You did your homework.
I did my homework in 1977 with Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi. What was it like to share the stage with those guys?
I've got those pictures. I've got the program for that night in my office in Atlanta. It was the first or second year that they had Saturday Night Live. I didn't know it was going on. I went up there and rehearsed with John. You're right. John Belushi was there. Bill Murray was there. Gilda Radner, Lorraine, Jane Curtin, and so forth. And so we practiced Thursday, Friday, and some of Saturday. And I'd never done this before, and I had to do 5 skits. I'm not an actor. I'm not a singer. I'm not an entertainer. So I got Bill Murray because I learned from watching other people. I learned how to play football by watching other people and studying other people. And so I got Bill Murray. I said, Bill, do these skits for me. I cannot do them like you. At least you can give me a model that I can learn from. And he did. So by him doing those skits, I didn't make a complete fool of myself. And it was fun, and I got to be great friends with all those people, and it was just a one-time shot. I didn't want to be in that world, but I sure enjoyed that night and getting to know those people.
But you kind of made that transition to that world. You retire in 1978, and 1979 you're on Monday Night Football with.
Well, I'm on Monday. I kind of owned Monday Night. I was on Monday Night Football, and I also in 1980 started a program out for ABC called That's Incredible with Kathy Lee Crosby and John Davidson. So we taped the That's Incredible shows so I could do Monday Night Football live. And before that came on live, I was on tape so we did that. And I did enough of that to know that's not what I wanted to do. And so I've always been in business, and my first job in the off season was at Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I worked for Wilson Truck System.
Okay.
And you know, my job was, I had an executive job. I went and knocked on the doors of shipping clerks all over the Dakotas and Minnesota, and because they would ship, our trucks would go from the Dakotas to Minnesota, Chicago, and back. And it was all regulated. It was so I got to meet the people of South and North Dakota by knocking on the doors of shipping clerks. They paid me a big salary to do that, $600 a month.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, you didn't become a millionaire overnight by playing professional football. You had to work at the off season. And
we had, you know,
build
we
your life
did,
like that.
but I was the only one who did.
Really?
I was the only one. The rest of them didn't, but you know, because I made $12,500, I did a lot of speeches, and I charged a lot of money for the speeches, probably more than I should have, $25 a speech. And so it's interesting. I look back not long ago, and I love the notion that I started in business when I was 7 years old with a paper out in Washington, D.C. But I earned more money every year of the 18 years I played football in business than I did in football. And so when I finished, I was already well down the road of knowing and learning and understanding how to build businesses.
That's what you're doing now. Out of your office in Atlanta, you've got GoSmallBiz.com and a bunch of other companies like that you guys help build small businesses.
And we're partnered with Steve Canoodle up here and the finance business, and that's a great part. I find that the partnerships in business are just as important as the partnerships in our locker room. We need partners, but you need partners you can depend on that share your ethics and care and concern, just like we do in the football. So that's been, you know, I partner with the people that are great people, great talents, and got great hearts and great souls, and that's why I came up here, because we partnered about 6 or 7 months ago, and he invited me to come up here and do a couple of dinners and lunches with the Chamber of Commerce and do this interview, and also have a client appreciation day. And I brought my son Matthew up here, who was with me at training camps in Mankato, and to come back and revisit, flying over this morning, the lakes and the beauty of this part of Minnesota was just out of sight. And so it's what partnerships are about, right? It's about relationships, and it's about a culture. And I find, and I get so much joy out of business, because in our businesses we build great relationships with our partners and with great relationships with our clients. And that's what life's about, is to help each other.
You in town for a while then, or just?
No, just today and tomorrow.
I'm sorry you couldn't get a better day. It's
this is perfect.
Raining outside.
This is perfect. This is Minnesota that I know.
Right.
And the beauty of this place. You guys are here all the time, and I go all over the world. And flying in here today, my goodness, even with the rain and the clouds and the beauty of the lakes and the ground is just spectacular. You're lucky people up here to be able to live in this kind of environment. And the people up here are, you know, I've, again, been all over the country and all over the world. The most rock-solid people I've ever been around are the people in Minnesota. And the South and North Dakota people I could put right in there, because it's the same. And it was a blessing for me to be able to experience this. My first daughter was born in Minneapolis, and so it's a very much part of the Tarkenton family.
We appreciate you stopping by and enjoy your time in the Lakes area.
Thank you.
It's Fran Tarkenton on Lakes TV3.